Hello, dear friends and fellow researchers. Today, I'm going to talk about a chapter entitled Theories from the book Introduction to Cultural Studies by Pramod K. Nayar. So, let us deep into it. So, let's begin with the basic introduction of the author, Pramod K. Nayar, who is a professor of English and Cultural Studies, and he holds UNESCO Chair in Vulnerability Studies in the Department of English, University of Hyderabad. He has written extensively on cultural studies, popular culture, post-humanism, and post-colonial studies. You can know more about him on this Google site page. The chapter entitled Theories outlines various theoretical frameworks used within the field of cultural studies. It systematically presents key theories such as structuralism, post structuralism, and deconstruction, Marxism, postmodernism, feminism, and post feminism, post colonial theories, technoculture and risk, and post humanism, exploring their core concepts and applications in cultural analysis. Structuralism, post structuralism, and Marxism are explained focusing on how they analyze power dynamics and cultural meaning making. The text of the chapter then explores feminist theory, queer theory, and post colonial theory, examining how these perspectives challenge dominant narratives and inequalities. Finally, the chapter introduces technoculture and risk and post-humanism, highlighting their relevance to understanding contemporary societal issues. Each theory here is explained with examples, activities designed to illustrate key concepts. The overall purpose is to provide a foundational understanding of the theoretical underpinnings of cultural studies, demonstrating how these approaches contribute to analysis of power, identity, and meaning within various cultural contexts. So, in short, the chapter is for someone who is entering into the field of cultural studies. So, let us look at these theories are discussed in the chapter briefly. I may not be able to give complete what we call explanation of the things discussed in the chapter, but I'll give you some glimpses of what the author is talking about. So let us begin with the most important theory, structuralism. The chapter provides three foundational assumptions of structuralism as outlined by Ferdinand de Saussure, which are first, language is arbitrary, meaning there is no inherent link between the words and meanings, or probably in the language of Saussure, there is no inherent link between the sign and its meaning. So signifier and signified are arbitrarily connected. Second assumption is language is relational, with meaning arising from differences. Okay. Differences in the sense that, uh, let's say, there are difference in terms of sound. When say cat and hat, these are two separate words to separate signs because there is a difference of the sound k and her. And because of these differences, as a communicator, we can identify the difference in the meaning. So there is what we call relatability or relational in the sense of syntagmatic and paradigmatic orders as well. And third assumption, language is systematic, where language constitutes our worldviews and how we understand it. So this is not only a structuralist belief, but also somewhere in Sapir and Whorf hypothesis, people talk about this issue that how our worldviews are affected by the language. Some important terms in structuralism are discussed here. First is arbitrariness. That is the idea that there is no natural or inherent connection between a word and its meaning. That is, meaning is derived by social convention. A society has accepted, a group of members or members of a particular community has accepted a particular word will mean something. So that social convention primarily gives the meaning. There is no natural meaning. Second term is binary oppositions, that is, pairs of opposing terms that create meaning through their differences and interrelationships. So, for example, here we have cat and hat. How are the opposing terms? So, except the first sound of both these words, ka and her, rest of the things are similar. So, the difference that we say that these are two different words is based on the difference of the first sound, ka and her. Okay. So, there is opposition in terms of this sound, and that's why there are two different words. Third term, signifier, the word or image, while the signified is the concept or meaning that is associated with it. Okay. So when I speak a word like cat, which is consisting of a chain of sounds ka, a, to, so that is signifier. And the meaning that I make in my mind when I hear this particular word or when I speak this word, okay, that is the signified. So when signifier and signified gets connected, we get a sign. But these signs are language specific, culture specific, and many times they are situation specific as well. Second important theory, post structuralism. So while discussing post structuralism, the chapter talks about the stability of the meaning. Chapter argues that meaning is never stable, but it's a result of difference, or the endless deferral of meaning through differences. It says each signifier points to other signifiers, and there is no stable endpoint. So here the term discussed is deference. The term is coined by Derrida to describe the way meaning is created through both difference and deferral. Meaning is always postponed or deferred. Next term, power oblique knowledge. So power and knowledge, as discussed in the chapter, are interwoven, and systems like law, religion, and medicines are all seen as discourses used to define and control populations. Michel Foucault, suggests that power structures rely on knowledge to control and classify populations, with discourses producing subjects. So the terms, important terms here are discourse, which means systems of knowledge and power that create subjects and ways of seeing the world. So, like we are all subjects, we are all individuals born and brought up and probably socialized and cultured in a particular system. So that particular system is primarily the discourse. And the second term, power oblique knowledge, the inseparable relationship between power and knowledge, where power creates knowledge and knowledge reinforces power. This is primarily the argument of Michel Foucault. And chapter discusses subaltern studies. Subaltern is discussed, stating that the term is used to describe oppressed or marginalized groups. Referring to Spivak's argument, the chapter says that the subaltern cannot speak for themselves because they are prevented by the structures of power. The term subaltern, which was used by Spivak means Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak, to describe groups that are marginalized and oppressed. So all those groups who don't have their voice or who are not given the space, the platform to speak, the platform to express themselves, they will all be considered subaltern. That would be based on gender, class, caste, religion, majority, minority. Next is Marxism. So discussing the ideas of base and superstructure in Marxism, the chapter says that the economic base, that is the material means of production, influences the social superstructure, that is culture and society. Class membership is defined by one's relationship to production, and equal unequal power relationships are naturalized by the ideology. So primarily, the concepts of base and superstructures are uh, given in detail, and how these concepts will affect the idea of class membership. The terms discussed here was economic base, the material means of production, that is considered economic base. For example, factories, land, resources. Second term is hegemony, the dominance of one group of or class over others, which is achieved through a combination of coercion and consent, and maintained through cultural institutions and ideologies. Third term, ideology, a system of beliefs and ideas that naturalizes social and economic inequalities. The fourth term, social superstructure, the cultural and social institutions, norms and ideas, example Gracia, law, family, education, that are shaped by the economic base. So these institutions are the social superstructure. Next theory, or rather approach, is postmodernism. Jean Franco's Lyotard defines meta-narrative, as discussed in the chapter, as overarching explanations or systems of knowledge, such as Marxism or religion, which attempt to account for all aspects of reality. So there is a meta narrative that tries to explain everything that happens in a subject's life. Lyotard argues that postmodernism is characterized by a distrust of these totalizing explanations. So the term meta-narrative, which is an overarching story or explanation that tries to explain all of reality, postmodernism is characterized by a distrust of these totalizing explanations. Again, in postmodernism, Jean Baudrillard presents the concept of hyperreal. The concept of hyperreal is also discussed here in the chapter, um, referring to Baudrillard's suggestion that in postmodern society, the distinction between the real and its representation has broken down, and we live in a world of hyperreality. Simulation has taken over, creating models of reality that have become more real than the real itself. The term hyperreality, a condition in postmodern society where the distinction between the reality and representation break down, and images or simulations are considered more real than the original. Gender, while discussing about the tenets of feminism, chapter identifies patriarchal structures that seek to subordinate women's lives and is a critic of the ways in which women are represented, particularly in the media. It argues that gender is a social construction and therefore it must be explored and critiqued. Again, the idea that it is arbitrary or conventional, gender is not something that is natural. The concept here, for example, while discussing other aspects of gender, the chapter also discusses queer theory, a perspective that seeks to destabilize traditional understanding of sexual and gender identities and to change the normativity of heterosexuality. Postcolonialism, postcolonial theory studies the influence of colonialism, and the modes of representation through which colonial power was established. It also examines the legacy of colonialism and how these legacies inform global relations. Postcolonialism, a term which is a critical perspective that analyzes the effects of colonialism on the colonized and examines the legacies of imperialism. Technoculture and risk is argued by Ulrich Beck. Risk society generates risk which are correlated with technology. The risk society is driven by technology, with risks themselves becoming part of commerce, requiring solutions that generate further risks. Some important concepts here, for example, technoculture and risk, the study of the ways that technology and social or environmental risk interact, focusing on issues such as consumerism, surveillance, and anxiety. The term risk society, the idea that modern society is defined by its engagement with manufactured risks, particularly ones associated with technology. And the concept of posthumanism is also discussed, a critical project. Posthumanism is a critical project that challenges the idea of the human as a unique and superior species, seeking to reconceptualize its relation to technology and other life forms. So that is all from my side today. Thank you.